Hi, welcome back to the channel. This video is the next in a series looking at the construction of a rear extension. In today's video we're going to look at the waterproofing of the roof structure. So in the previous video we showed you the construction of the roof up to the installation of the insulation, which you can see here. The guys are standing on the insulation. This is a warm deck finish, so the insulation goes on top of the roof structure. In a cold deck, as we discussed previously, insulation is pushed up into the individual rafters and you actually fit it in between all of the beams. But here we've got a continuous covering of insulation. And the next stage after the insulation goes on is to fit plyboard on top of that insulation. So you can see the guys here have got the sheets of plyboard on site, and now they're just making sure everything is completely square before they start fixing it on top. So you've got to make sure the first piece is perfect and then every other piece will follow from that. So what they're doing here is just measuring, making sure it's completely plumb and square, and then it's a case of screwing all of this plyboard down into the joist. So the ceiling joist, the rafters, have been set in the structure itself, and we need to find those and we will screw down through. So you can see the guy's got the drill here and he's got very long screws, and basically you're screwing all the way down to keep this firmly in place. So that's basically the procedure. We put all of the ply down on top of the insulation, screw it firmly into place. So we'll be fixing lots and lots of screws here to make sure that there's no movement, that we've got a complete covering, that this goes all the way across with no gaps. And then once we put all the plyboard in place, then we will then put the felt coating on top, which is actually the waterproof covering. So the plyboard is not waterproof, and we'll see that in a minute, because we had to have a break between fitting the plyboard and putting the felt on because the guy who was doing the felt wasn't available. So this isn't waterproof. This is just providing a solid structure that we will then fix the felt onto. So that's basically the procedure that you'll see in this video. So we'll speed it up a little bit now, but you can see that we're just putting the ply all the way across the roof. If you remember from the previous video, we've got a big roof light here. So we've built up an edge around that where the glass will be fitted on top of. You can see it in the bottom right hand corner of the screen at the moment. So we're fitting all of this to the surface, and then we'll have to fit it around this roof light here as well. So that's basically what we're doing. So we'll just skip through that now. So here we are a little bit further on, and all of the ply is now in place. So all of the structure has been completed. So this is all of the construction, but now we need to move to the waterproofing, and that's obviously the critical part. So we've had to make sure that we've got a fall on this roof. So we're falling away from the house. So there is a defined slope on this structure. Obviously it looks very flat when we're looking down on it here, but this roof has a pronounced 4-degree fall from the house to the edge of the structure, and that's really important when you're building a flat roof. They should never ever be flat. They should never be perfectly flat, because obviously water will then sit on top of it. So you have to have a slope to encourage the water to run away. So now that we constructed it, we then had to cover it because plyboard is not waterproof. There was a storm coming. We couldn't do the felting on the same day because we didn't have time. It was the weekend was coming up and the guy wasn't available to actually do the felting. So we needed to make sure that we didn't encounter any problems and any damage from the heavy water that we knew was coming. So it's a bit of a hassle, but these things happen on jobs. You know, you have to just take account of what's happening with the weather, and sometimes you can't get everything done in time to beat the weather and make sure that you don't have to do these type of things. So we covered everything up with tarp, and then as we expected, the rain came and the tarp did its job. So it kept off the water. So you can see here, this is just a brief bit of footage showing the rain coming and just showing why it's really important to make sure that you cover up the work, because if we hadn't have, then the ply could have become compromised. It could have got saturated and started to split and curl up and actually not be sound for us to be able to put that felt on as we build through the structure. So really important to take precautions at the end of each stage And if you know there's some rain coming or some other form of weather, you need to make sure you've taken action to stop it undoing the good work that you've already done. So we're now jumping forward to the day that we're putting the felt on, and as you can see, we've removed the tarpaulin, but there's still quite a bit of damp that's got through. So where the joints were and where it wasn't 100% waterproof, some water has got through, and you can see that the plyboard is wet, and we can't fix felt to wet plyboard, so we're now having to dry that manually. So that's the first job for the roofer, is to get out your gas canister and switch the torch on and actually manually dry this plyboard. So we could obviously wait for this to happen naturally, but we don't want to waste time. This only takes 20 minutes or so if you go around and apply it carefully. Obviously, you need to make sure that you don't cause any damage with the flames, but an experienced roofer will be used to doing this type of preparation before he starts work, so shouldn't be a problem. So we're now on to the time-lapse video for the installation of the felt itself. So you can see that we've got the upstand for the roof light, so we prepared that first. We put some bitumen around there and just made it waterproof, and now we're applying a waterproof membrane. So there's going to be 3 coats to this roof. We're going to have waterproof membrane on the bottom, then we're going to have an underlay as the middle coating, and then we'll have the felt as the top coating. So that's 3 layers of waterproofing, which should mean that this roof will be good for at least the next 20 years. So you can see that we've got the first layer down already. Now we're putting down the undercoat. So this is essentially with overlapping, so you can see where the joints are. They're in different places for the 2 different surfaces, so we don't have consecutive joints on top of one another, so it makes it more difficult for the water to actually penetrate through if you haven't got all of your jointing sitting directly above each other. Very simple, basic roofing technique. But these things are important, and you need to make sure that you understand why it's being done. So that's the purpose of these videos, is to really give everybody an opportunity to have a look at how these things are prepared, so that when you're doing your project, you'll be able to make sure that everything's being done correctly, or if it's being done differently, that the guys doing it can explain to you exactly why they're doing exactly what they're doing. So we've now got the felt to be applied. So just preparing the edge before we do that. So just trimming everything off and making sure that it's nice and square. And then it's just a case of laying the felt in the opposite direction. So you can see that this is coming on at 90 degrees to the 2 joints that we had previously. And that's giving us an additional layer of comfort in terms of the waterproofing, because water has now got to make its way through a lot of different ways to get down through this ceiling. So hopefully will never happen. So you can see we're just torching this on using the gas burner to melt the undersurface of the felt, which is basically plastic, and as you heat that, it becomes soft and malleable, and as you roll it out, it sticks down to the roof, and once it's in place, it's not going anywhere. It's actually quite difficult to remove. So once that's torched on and fitted, then this is the finished surface for this roof. So you can see there's a bit tidying up around the edges and making sure that everything's been jointed correctly, and we've finished off all the sides, and essentially making sure that the water is going to run in the right direction and not pool on this roof, which is what you're looking to avoid with all flat roofs. You don't want water to be sitting there to be able to freeze and cause any problems going forward. So that's the main roof done, and then we had to come back and sort out the roof light. So that was a bit more detail and a bit more preparation, and obviously the drip edge there. So the right hand side of the property, we just finished doing all the edging on that, which is clearly important. You can see that we've lapped it up a little bit so that the water will not just run off the edge, but it will run down towards the end of the extension rather than just flowing straight over. Again, very simple, basic flat roofing technique to make sure you can direct the water down to the gutter, which will sit across the bottom of the extension once everything is in place. So now we're just doing some work on the upstand for the roof light. So you can see that we're applying all of the felt around there, cutting small pieces and actually blow torching it on. So exactly the same process that we did for the flat roof itself, but we're now building it all around the upstand so that that's 100% waterproof. And then we're going to fit a large piece of glass on top of that upstand, and that's basically the roof light completed. But this joint here for the curb, for where the upstand comes up, is really important, because anywhere where you've got two surfaces meeting, a vertical and a flat surface, that's always the biggest risk of letting water through, because water can sit there and then over time it could possibly penetrate. So it's really important to get the upstand built correctly and then make sure that the felt waterproofing is perfect, which is why we put some bitumen on it earlier to make sure that it's got some extra level of protection, not just the felt, it's got something else in there to make that wood resist water coming through and entering the building at any point in the future. So just tidying up now, finishing off the last few pieces, pulling everything together, and then we'll be covering over the roof light, because obviously that's still a big hole until we get the glass. We can't do anything with that, so we put a bit of plyboard on that, bit of tarp over the plyboard, and then we're basically done. So this roof is now completely finished, watertight, and we've got to put some guttering on the bottom later, but essentially the felt roof is now completed and it's time to go back to doing the internals on the job. So please give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't, and we will see you on the next video.